Hey, welcome to Hunters Connect. Today we're talking about maps. We're going to talk about digital maps versus paper maps, and we're going to talk about how to use maps specifically for hunting purposes. So whatever map you have, whether it's digital or paper, you're going to want to look at the legend of the map. That's just going to be the little, section in whatever corner that's going to explain what is what, whether it's land designation, roads, rivers, streams, lakes, whatever. It's all going to be in the legend. And on digital maps, it's going to be different. Such as on X Maps, the one that I'm using, you have to click map layers and then you can toggle on and off what layers are available. That's essentially your legend. Maps are going to be on different scales, but generally they have a grid separated out on mile by mile basis. So you know that each square indicates a mile. Now with something on a digital map, depending on what program you're using, on a GPS or on my phone, I can just draw a line between two areas and it'll tell me how far that is. And the scale is relative to how far you zoom in or zoom out. So that's constantly changing on a digital map. Paper map, it's fixed, obviously. You have to just look at the legend and figure it out. Some maps will have topo lines indicating the topography and elevation change. Other maps will not have that. Digital maps, again, it could have either or. On X Maps, you can toggle it on or off, whether you have topo lines or not. Know too that when you're looking at, if you're scouting an area to hunt and you're looking at maps and you see a ton of different roads and trails, know that it's not always the same when you get there. A lot of roads are closed on Forest Service or BLM lands. You can't just go out and drive every single road that you see on the map. Know that things are going to change when you show up. Almost always is never what you actually think it is, but maps are a great tool to help you figure out a basis of where you need to go and what you can and can't do. It's also important to know what type of land you're on. So I'm going to go through the different types of land designation and generally what they are on the map. Different maps are different. Check the legend, make sure the colors match with what I'm saying. I'm going to start with the most common out in the West, the Forest Service and the BLM. They have the least amount of restrictions in terms of hunting. So with Forest Service, generally open to hunting, there's going to be two types. You got your regular Forest Service land and wilderness areas. A lot of times wilderness is either going to be hash marked or darker green, and regular Forest Service is just a normal green. BLM is yellow. Most often BLM is open to hunting. There's very few restrictions other than road management plans. You can't drive off designated roads, but in terms of hunting, you can usually hunt BLM lands. When you get into state-owned lands is where it gets tricky. Different states have different rules associated with their state lands. And a lot of times there's multiple different kinds of state lands. They're usually going to be blue on a map. Sometimes you can go and recreate on that land. Sometimes it requires an extra license to go recreate on those lands. And other times you cannot go out on state land at all. So make sure to check with your state and see what the rules are associated with state lands. There's also lands that are generally owned by the state, but it's the state game agency that owns it. Most often, state wildlife agencies allow hunting, but there's a lot of times different restrictions on time of year you can go in and what you can and can't do on those state wildlife management areas or whatever your state might call it. So there's also Bureau of Reclamation land. These exist around reservoirs and dams and things of that sort. Again, you're going to have to check on almost every individual site on the rules associated with Bureau of Reclamation land. A lot of times this is a dark brown color on the maps. National parks are purple. Most national parks do not allow hunting. You're more than welcome to go in there and enjoy wildlife viewing, take pictures, but you can't shoot them. Occasionally you're going to encounter Fish and Wildlife Service land. And this is also usually a green color, which can be confusing with Forest Service. They still allow hunting, but just know that there's going to be additional rules on Fish and Wildlife Service land. One thing when you're looking at a map that you're going to watch for is Bureau of Indian Affairs lands or Indian Reservation lands. These are often not open to public hunting. They a lot of times have hunting programs. You have to go through a whole separate license system. Another thing you might encounter when you're looking at a map is military areas, and most often you cannot even enter those areas. It'll be very clearly defined on your maps. Most states are also going to have county land, which could be who knows what color, but just if you're on a digital mapping system, zoom in, see if it's county land. County also often allows hunting, but again, individual pieces of land, you're gonna have to check to see what you can and cannot do on that county land. So I'm not gonna lie, the easiest way to navigate and know where you are is using a digital mapping system. There are multiple different kinds. I use the OnX system. It costs money, but it's just so fluid and it works, so I use it. Digital mapping systems comes in really handy with private land. When you're hunting small tracts of private land, a lot of times in the Midwest or East, you're gonna have these small tracts and you might get permission on just 10 acres or 4 acres or whatever it is. If you have a digital map that has a position-based feature, you can tell where you are in the confines of that small piece of private land and make sure that you're on the right land where you have permission to hunt. One of the biggest things that I do when I'm using a digital mapping system is I save a waypoint at my pickup or the trailhead or wherever it is. You save a waypoint there, then you always have a point to go back to if you get lost or you need to navigate out in the dark. Another tip, if you're using digital maps, always have lots of battery power. Whether you have a battery pack to charge your phone or multiple batteries for your GPS, I always carry both just kind of as a backup, because one time I dropped my GPS in the middle of the Missouri River and I didn't have it anymore, so I had my phone as a backup. It's good to have two sources, especially if you're relying solely on digital maps. Have some sort of a backup. Hopefully I've provided you with a little bit of insight on how to use maps, paper and digital, for hunting purposes. Be sure to check out our other videos on Hunters Connect, and make sure you leave a comment or a question, whatever you have, in the comments below. And thanks for watching.